Welcome to the Biostock Studio and this episode of Health and Wealth, where I have as a guest with me today Claus Henrik Johansen, who is the CEO and founder of Global Health Invest, a global investment fund that's listed in Denmark. I'd like to start, not many people have started their own funds. You are one of them, one of the few, the only one I know at least. And of course we want to talk about that. But I'd like to go back to the very beginning first. What made you interested in becoming an analyst and an investor in the first place?
That's a very good question. I studied economics at the Copenhagen University, and at the same time, I worked in the Ministry of Economic Affairs. So that was about, let's say, describing the economic development and so on. But I thought I needed a change, and I applied for a job in a mutual fund, investing in countries all around in the world. I was sitting in the macroeconomic department, but I thought it was a little bit boring. I could hear all the equity investors in the other room shouting and laughing and all that, and I asked my boss, "Can I please change? Because this sounds really fun." And he said, "Of course, you can change." So then I started to, let's say, do the deep dive into how to do equity investments.
You get really curious. What were they shouting? What was so much fun?
Back then, it was all about Ericsson and Nokia. So it was in 1999. So that was in the really, let's say, the high-flying, hype days, internet and all that. So it was really interesting, of course. So I wanted to learn what's going on.
Yeah, and the shouting got even worse than in the early 2000 when everything crashed, I guess.
Yes, first of all, in the first year, everything was going up, and I think the portfolio managers had fantastic years. And then in the following 2 years, they were not laughing that much.
No, I think I tend to see some kind of parallel here with the biotech space, but let's not dive into that right now. So you started out then, you're looking at tech companies and Nokia and stuff like that, but now you're specialized in healthcare. Why did that change come about, and what made you interested in healthcare sector?
Yeah, I started out in covering the financial sector, and then my boss asked me to look into industrial companies and electric and gas utility companies, and then I changed job to Danske Bank, and within 2 years I had a good colleague of mine that asked me, "Claus, would you like to join the healthcare team?" And I said no immediately because I thought it was very complicated, 2 long words. I was not able to pronounce the words. And he said, "Well, relax, I can teach you everything." And I went home, thought about it for one day and said, okay, let's give it a go. And then I discovered that science and, investing comes very nicely together in the healthcare space and biotech space, and it's actually about numbers. It's about understanding the profile of drugs and molecules and numbers. I'm a number guy, so I really enjoyed it from the moment. And I done this since then, since 2004.
Yeah, and being a numbers guy, that's one thing. Being able to calculate the forecast for profits and so on. But like you said, there are a lot of long words in healthcare and pharma. So, did you ever feel like you needed to do some special education in terms of the scientific part of things?
Yes. So of course I was reading some books on the side, but let's say, in our, investment department, we looked at companies that are, profitable, but we also had some biotech companies. So I was, of course, starting with the companies where there was some profit, so big pharma companies. So, and then just to learn what are these companies actually producing, what are they selling, what is the, sales profile of drugs, and then, of course, at the same time, I learned how to evaluate when there was a clinical readout from a clinical trial, to understand what is good and what is not so good, and what about the side effects. So of course, even though that I'm a number guy, I study economics, but I always enjoy to talk to experts, so doctors or scientific advisors, to ask them what they think is good or bad, so to get, let's say, the nuance of the data. So because I'm just the portfolio manager, so I have to balance both upside and downside.
So then over the years you built up a good network of experts that you can turn to then to get some advice about this and that.
Yes, yeah, and I also have, in Global Health Invest, I have 4 advisors. So I have an advisory board of 3 professors that have plus 30 years of experience, and I have 1 CFO, former CFO, with 30 years of experience. So I also have, let's say, the financial guy on the side that I can debate observations and also try to get insights on how to think about let's say, how to operate and manage a global company.
And if like me, someone follows you on LinkedIn, they can see that you're also very active in terms of going to conferences. I mean, you recently went to JPM, which is arguably the largest industry conference for healthcare, I would say, and seems like you are always on the calls for analyst calls with the big companies and listening in and so on. So I guess that's a big part of your work as well, to keep updated.
Yes, I mean, some say that this is not a job, this is a lifestyle, because you start very early in the morning and the stock market is closing, 10 o'clock in the evening in US. So I'm always on somehow to let's say, to find out what's going on, to listen, of course, both to what European companies are saying, also US companies. But what I really, let's say, find out many years ago was it was difficult really to talk to these big pharma companies, because they were not really willing to tell you exactly what they were thinking about their drugs. So that was a big moment for me. That was, okay, they're not telling me anything, so I have to do my own work. So I have to find out how many patients is there available, and how many patients do actually get the drug, get the treatment. So I spent a lot of time traveling to scientific conferences, listening to what doctors are saying, both in the European conferences but also at the US conferences. And they're quite different. But in that way I can, let's say, really understand both the, say, current drugs on the market, current treatments, but also what's coming. And it's really important to remember that some companies are coming from behind. So you have to look in the mirror and see, okay, what's coming competition-wise. So
you can't just look at the leaders right now.
You have to look at the leaders, because they make the money right now, but you have to always, let's say, try to figure out what would be competition, what will be the environment 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
I always think that it seems to be such a 3-dimensional or even 4-dimensional space, and there's so many parameters that you have to keep track of. How do you stay updated, and besides going to these conferences and talking to experts?
To stay updated, that's a very good question, but you of course have to look at what is the company's, let's say, what kind of product news is there, what kind of press releases is there, what kind of information is public. And I only trade, let's say, in public information. I don't have any insider. I never had any inside information.
Probably a good thing.
Probably a good thing. I don't want to go to jail, so it's a very important thing. So, but it doesn't mean that you are not able to talk to doctors, and you have to talk to different doctors, different experts. You have to talk to different, let's say, lab technicians, to listen to what they really think. And I think that's what I enjoy, is to find out how do the users of these products, what do they really think? What is important for them?
I can imagine that can be quite a big difference between what the actual users or prescribers say about something rather than from the compliance team at the big pharma, what they have allowed people to tell.
I haven't really came across yet that big a difference. But it's, let's say, in order to, you can always look at let's say a machine and say, okay, what kind of tests can you run on this machine? But if you talk to the lab technician, then you understand what is important. That's not all the tests, but it's how to operate the machine. So those companies that can really develop machines that are easy to operate, they will have success. And that's where some companies are really trying to make a difference, to make it seamless and so it works. And it's more, let's say, it's also possible for less experts to operate these machines, because the problem is with our healthcare sector is that we really lack educated people more or less everywhere. So we have to make machines easier and easier to operate.
So staying updated is a huge part of it. Keeping your sort of ear to the tracks, listening what's coming, and also talking to the people on the ground that actually use the products. Do you also have any sort of really fundamental guidelines for your investing? That like you have the classics: don't put all your eggs in one basket, spread your risks, and so on. Do you have any of those? Call it mottos that you follow when you invest?
I mean, Global Health invest what I say global companies. So I don't invest, let's say, in a company that is predominantly based and selling products to, let's say, Scandinavian countries or European countries. So it needs to be global. So and there's a lot of global companies, of course, in all niche sectors within the healthcare sectors. And you also need to be profitable, which is sometimes a little bit underestimated. But it's quite important that you are highly profitable, because that makes you. It's also a sign that you have great products and you have a, let's say, lean selling machine. You're good at really distributing the products efficiently, but you also have the opportunity to invest, and that's so important these days. And I think it's important to realize that a lot of companies, they cannot develop everything themselves. That was the big mantra many years ago in the pharma companies, that we have a very good research department here. We know what's going on.
Sort of competing a little bit with saying how much they actually reinvested in their own R&D, right?
Yes. So you both have to look at, of course, what can they develop in their own R&D department, but also how good are they at really looking out and seeing what's popping up, new instruments, new devices that they can really, let's say, in-license, and they can scale it up, because some of these companies, they are really good, let's say, scalers. They can really scale up both selling-wise and also manufacturing-wise. So it doesn't mean that I'm just in favor of these companies buying companies, but if they can really in-license these products as early as possible, then they can really add value.
So no sort of simple words of wisdom, more like find your profitable companies with a global market and with a mean, lean selling machine,
yes.
More or less. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So going back to what we started, you have started your own fund. I mean, so many questions come up in my head, but we can start with the simple why.
That's a very good question, why? But I just had something in my body saying that I want to set up this fund, and I got that feeling many years ago, and I wanted to. I think the healthcare sector is sometimes a bit overlooked sector, because it's actually a growth sector. It's growing, and the sector is growing faster than the general, let's say, GDP growth. So it's a fast-growing sector, and it's also less cyclical. So that means it's quite attractive to get a good return with less volatility. But I wanted to make a fund because to make it really, let's say, accessible for everybody, every, let's say, citizen in Denmark to have access to a fund that everybody can invest in. So there's no minimum ticket of, let's say, 100,000 euros. It's a very low bar to get into this fund. And I looked at a lot of funds around in the world because I want to see what's out there. Also to see how my fund is uniquely positioned. And I can say that it is uniquely positioned because it's investing in these, let's say, global and profitable companies, very innovative companies. They're good at, let's say, using the capital the right way. And that makes them able to really grow a little bit faster. So if you're a long-term investor and you have some savings money to your pension, this is a good instrument for that. Because it's all about, let's say, do the hard work for the long run. Don't, let's say, talk too many buzzwords, but just, let's say, really grind and focus, and then you can really, let's say, have good growth in the future. So, but I wanted to make this fund so it could be available to everybody in Denmark, also globally. It's listed on Nasdaq in Copenhagen, so everybody can buy and get access to this fund.
Even Swedes?
Even Swedes. Actually, everybody in the whole world. So that's a security code. So everybody can invest in this fund. So there's no limitations. But I think it's just like tech funds. Tech is we like to invest in tech. I would say the healthcare sector is actually a sector that is enabled by tech. So the healthcare sector is really a tech sector that is really using a lot of different technologies, and they are really actually agnostic. That means they don't care about which company is producing, but they just want the best of the best technologies that can enable them to make great products. So the healthcare sector is a highly, let's say, tech sector. So we can talk about that later, but health tech is of course also a buzzword that is popping up more and more.
You have told me earlier that you did not want to disclose your positions, the specific companies that you have invested in. Yes. And of course you can explain why. Yeah. But if we talk about sectors, is it pharma, like drug companies, or is it medtech, or is it, are you agnostic that way, diagnostics and whatever? Very
good question. And the reason about disclosing it yet, that's because it's these AI days, everybody can copy it within seconds. So right now, I'm keeping, let's say, a little the position to myself. But the distribution of the companies, it's important to say that it's not only pharma. There's only maybe just 5-6 pharma companies. So it's a lot of companies in the healthcare and life science sector. So there's a lot of companies just producing, let's say, equipment to the life science sector to make the analysis, to make the judgment, to make sure that these drugs are with the highest quality. So you have these, you need to perform the tests. You also need to perform tests in order to diagnose what kind of disease or treatment you need. So there's also diagnostic companies in the portfolio. And there's also, let's say, companies that provide both, let's say, if you need to have an implant in your body, if you need a new hip or a new knee and so on. So there's a lot of different companies that is actually either producing the products or devices that can be used in treating you if you arrive at the hospital and you need proper care. There can also be healthcare insurance, so health insurance companies. So there's a lot of different companies. So it's all about, let's say, it's the whole breadth of the healthcare sector. So it can be many companies, but they have to be, let's say, the best of the best.
And they all have in common that they are profitable.
Yes.
Important. So you started a fund. You get to manage, well, basically people's money.
Yeah.
That's a huge responsibility as well.
Yes.
Do you sleep well at night?
I do. Every night I sleep very well. I've been doing this for, more or less 25 years. So in the beginning, I was, of course, really scared about making mistakes. But I had a very good colleague saying to me, we all make mistakes. If you look at great portfolio managers, they also make mistakes. but it's important to learn. And I really remember those words every day, that we are here to manage money. It also means that you need to, let's say, manage risk. So you have to do your proper analysis of what can go wrong and what is the downside if I'm wrong. And you have to manage both, let's say, the opportunity and also the risk every day. But nobody can be right every time. But you need to really learn about what did really, what was the mistakes, and if you can look at reducing the number of mistakes. That's also why I'm only having 25 companies in my portfolio, because if you have 50 or 40 companies in your portfolio, then you have to, actually you have, let's say, much less time to analyze each company. So if you start to really have a really high cutoff, so really picking the best of the best, they have to be profitable and really innovative companies. But to stay innovative is really tough. So that's why you really need to keep track on, do they really still produce and sell drugs or treatments or devices that are really in the best of the best.
25 companies, that's still a lot, I would say. There's only 24 hours in the day.
Yes, so that's...
And you sleep well.
And I sleep well, yes. I didn't say that I'm sleeping much, but it's a lot. It's nice. It's actually nice to have a focus. So because every time, it's just like if you are, let's say, looking for a house or an apartment, where do you really want to stay? You always know that, you know, if you look at 25 houses or 50 houses, if you look at the numbers from 25, you have to rank them from 25 down to 50. You know those houses between 25 and 50, you're not really interested in living in those houses. But if you really pick, let's say, the 25, then you know you are in the right, let's say, you're moving in the right direction. So I think it's also helpful to have a strong focus and find out what do I really not like, and then what could cost me in terms of the return. And that's also, let's say, comes with my knowledge and my experience, that I've learned that there are some companies that can cost you a lot performance-wise. And it tends to be those companies that are in the early phase of, let's say, really growing in a new market. They have all the best intentions, probably, to gather market share in different countries and so on. But there's always something that probably goes wrong, that they have underestimated. So these companies, they don't have the same experience as, let's say, global established companies that have tried it many times before. And that reduces the risk of the portfolio to really pick those companies that have global experience.
So are you never tempted then still to go into a biotech that has the
always
potential to become a unicorn or a 10-bagger, if you will?
Always tempted, but I have a strategy and I have a focus, so that will not be in this portfolio.
Okay. Do you have a side portfolio of your own that you just put all the lottery tickets in?
No, I don't have. I only have one fund, and I have my own pension money also in the fund. So I keep, let's say, I spend all the time on trying to manage that, let's say, wealth. So I have hopefully a good pension when I retire one day. I don't plan to do that anytime soon.
It's good that you have skin in the game. So
yes, yeah.
You lose if the clients lose.
Exactly. And that's, I think, I've always thought about it, say, I want to create an instrument that is really about creating wealth, but in a, let's say, slow and stable way. Of course, I have a benchmark. That's the primary focus of the fund. That is to return an investment return that is higher than the benchmark. The benchmark is MSCI Global Healthcare. So I have let's say, a tough benchmark every day that I need to beat.
What level is that on, if you in terms of return in percentage? So
very good question. So if you think about, let's say, the long-term return on the global equity market, it's around 7.4% in the last 30 years. It has been higher recently. We have seen that in US and S&P 500. But on average in the long term, it's more or less 7.4. In the healthcare sector, you actually get more or less bit more than 2% with higher return. You did that for the last 30 years. We haven't done that for the last 10 years, and there's probably a good reason for that. But so I tend to, let's say, it's not a promise, but if I can, let's say, provide a return of 10, 11, 12%, I think I'm going in the right direction. So of course I have to have a portfolio where companies, where the earnings is growing around this level, because that keeps me, let's say, really focused on how can I really provide a return that is above the benchmark. And there's a cost every day. There's a management fee. So I have to look to really make a better return. So I have to, because I have to pay the costs. And so far it's good. So far the performance has been good for the fund compared to the benchmarks. It has 3 months anniversary now. Right. So far it's good. But of course we are long-term investors. So the advice is to have 5 years, minimum 5 years investment horizon if you put the money in the fund.
So 3 months is a very short time.
Very short. Too short.
Do you want to be more specific as to how well has it performed?
Yes, it has been around between 2 to 3%. It depends on the week we look at right now. But that's very, those that are investing in the global markets know that even to provide a 1% return that is higher than the benchmark is quite difficult. So if I can stay at this level over the long term, I'm definitely going in the right direction. So far we had a good start.
So you mentioned the management fees that you have to pay, but that's also something that the fund pays you, I guess?
Yes. So of course there is a fee. It's 1.6%. That is the total cost every year. So I'm not getting the 1.6. There's a lot of costs to do the administration of the fund. So before I get, let's say, the residual.
Okay, but is your own fee or whatever you make, is that also then sort of dependent on the return of the fund, so that you get a higher salary if that return is good?
There is no bonus. There's no, let's say, there's no, let's say, bonus element in the fee structure. So this is a very, I only get the management fee. So of course, if there's more money in the fund, then I can have a higher salary. I have so far also, I have a board that I have to pay. I have my advisors that I also have to pay. So that's why the residual is not very big so far. So there's a lot of costs, but I chose to set up a board. Not all investment advisors have a board, but I want to do it properly. So I have a board that is supervising what I'm doing, which is good. Also because one thing is to set up a fund, but when you set up a fund, there's a lot of administrative work. There's a lot of business processes that you need to describe in order to get the permission from the financial authorities to be a portfolio manager, an investment advisor. So to have everything in place, it's really good that I have a board with very strong experience in this industry, so they can always, let's say, keep me on track that we are doing everything properly.
All right. And speaking of administration, then why did you choose to list the fund on Nasdaq? Because I guess that's another level of administration attached to that.
Yes and no. You can always have a fund that is, of course, not listed, but I wanted to have a listed fund in order so everyone can access this fund at any time. So it's a liquid instrument. You can buy it and sell it every minute you can buy it, sell it. So it's very liquid. So and when it's public, there's also public returns out there. So everybody is not hidden.
Okay.
But I wanted that was, let's say, my dream was to have this fund that is available for everyone, and also that you don't need 100,000 euros to get access. There is some funds where you have to have really big money. I've looked around in the world and seen there's even some fund that is demanding maybe $10 million just to get access to the fund. So to have a fund where everybody can really participate. So if you can afford to pay 2 cups of coffees In a cafe, you can actually buy one certificate, more or less, at the fund. So everybody can.
Or one cup in Denmark.
Or one cup in Denmark.
So, just curious, how big is the fund today? How much money is it in?
It's we started out with 90 million Danish kroner, and we are more or less close to passing 200 in the value of the fund. So we have more than 100 and close to 190 million Danish kroner that has actually, let's say, been invested in the fund.
Okay.
But because the fund is above 100 right now, there's a good return, 4 to 5% so far. It's 3 months old, so it's a good return in that period. So more or less 200 million Danish kroner.
That sounds pretty good. I can't help but think that once you do this, start a fund, you take on a long-term commitment. Obviously, you have a long-term investment horizon in the fund, and everything you say points to the fact that it's going to be a long-term, but it's also a long-term commitment for you personally.
Yes.
What is your driving force? What gets you up in the morning and, full of energy to say, I'm going to manage my fund today?
This gets me up in the morning. I mean, every time I'm going to bed, I say, I look forward, because this is what my dream is. That is to set up this healthcare fund and to see what's new, what news is there tomorrow, what's coming out. And I'm also always looking forward to going to a scientific conference, to see what kind of results is coming up now. Where is the science moving within different technologies? It could be gene therapy, whatever, cancer treatments. So that's my, let's say, my driving force is this fund, and it's because I wanted to set up a fund that could be, let's say, that people can invest in, because it's a complicated sector. I had some people telling me in Denmark that we like to invest in Novo Nordisk, for instance, but we know it's a complicated world. So if you have a fund, I would like to put some money in that fund, because I would like to spread my risk. And because you say that you invest in good companies that are able to make money, and they are not, let's say, falling off a cliff tomorrow. So it's not biotech company where there can be a binary decision and the money can be gone tomorrow. Because it's relatively stable companies. It doesn't mean that the share price can go up or down. It will happen, and it happens. But as long as there is growth in the earnings, then we are, let's say, in a very good position. I like to help people, and I've decided that to stay, let's say, in the investment industry, and the way that I help people is to, let's say, take care of their savings, investing them in, let's say, good companies, stable companies, and not take too much risk. There has to be a right balance between opportunities and risk.
And you mentioned Novo Nordisk as an example, not saying that that's one of the companies you've invested in, but you can't really look at healthcare sector without thinking about at least them, especially in Denmark. Do you think, what's your take on, I mean, you don't have to give, you can't give any investment advice, but the situation with Novo and all the obesity sector with the competition and so on.
Yeah.
We recently had a huge drop in the Novo stock, about 20% very quickly. What's your sort of snapshot take of the situation right now with the company?
The snapshot is that I came from this conference in San Francisco, and the big topic was, of course, obesity. And everybody knows there's, a billion of patients out there. So it's also a question about how can we serve these patients. And the problem has been, let's say, supply, has been lack of manufacturing capacity, both from Lilly and Novo. So that's the main, let's say, obstacle right now. So that's why they invest a lot in manufacturing capacity right now. Of course, then the stock market is looking how will this situation potentially change in the next 5-10 years. And that's where, of course, where the share price is moving up and down a lot, because it is a race both to have very efficacious treatments, so treatments that can really provide you with a good weight loss. And the question is also now becoming into, and that it's not necessarily a bigger weight loss that is better. So you have to look at different biomarkers that you're losing, let's say, not let's say muscle or bone, that you actually lose more fat. So of course the market is looking into what could be the new treatment paradigm. We know that in the next 3, 4, 5 years, Novo and Lilly will be, let's say, those that have the biggest, more or less, market positions. But what about the next 10 to 15 years? So that's why I'm looking at also what kind of companies do have a small molecule strategy. So Novo is there, Lilly is there. There's also other companies that is trying to, let's say, develop and also market these oral treatments. So we will see that much more in the coming years, a rollout of tablets of, let's say, oral treatments. So both Novo, they have just submitted an application to market their treatment as an oral treatment, and we have data from Lilly coming out during this summer. So we'll see this market transition from just being an injectable market into small molecules, so we can really, let's say, scale up and provide more treatments available to both people in US, Europe, and the rest of the world. But it is, let's say, it has been a big market. So I always say that this is a blue ocean right now, but it's turning into a pink ocean. It's probably a bit provocative to say that.
What's the mean, pink ocean?
Mean is a blue ocean. That's where you have, let's say, you are maybe 2 sharks and you have eaten everything, so there's no blood in the water anymore. You're just swimming around. You have the blue ocean for yourself.
A full belly.
The problem is then suddenly if there is something, turning up, small fishes, so this is small companies in the world popping up today because they also want to be the big shark. And then we have a lot of sharks suddenly in the water, and this will turn, of course, into a bloody water. So we'll see more competition because the opportunity is so big that, and we can see that of also the valuation of the companies that is trying to be listed, that there is both a high probability, not a high probability, but there is a high potential. We can always talk about the probability, but there was also a theme at JP Morgan in San Francisco that is very costly. It's very costly. We can see that from Novo and Lilly, how much they invest in capacity. So a lot of venture companies is taking these molecules into phase 2, but it's very costly to go into the phase 3 program. So the market is right now discussing what does it really take to cross over from a phase 2 to phase 3, because it's really costly. So you don't, let's say, you need to have more than just good data. You need to have clear data. So both from a efficacy standpoint, but also from the safety profile, and also how tolerable is it. So that is not, let's say, giving you diarrhea or create some vomiting.
That's a very fast way to weight loss, though.
It is.
Not so pleasant.
But it's not so pleasant that you need a lot of trousers. So it's not so nice. But so the thing is, if you can really develop a new treatment that is very tolerable and gives you an attractive weight loss, then you have a winner. So I think the whole science, of course, in the world, think about how can we really develop this treatment. It has been so difficult for so many years. A lot of companies have tried. So it was first with Novo Nordisk product and then Lilly's product, where you really had a game-changing weight loss. And that was also in the, let's say, in the doctor community. There was a scientific article that described that if you are losing more than 15 kilos or % body weight, then you can actually become, if you are diabetic, you can actually become pre-diabetic. So that is a game changer. So it's not only, don't treat just to look good,
nice.
Right?
Oh.
So, but you also can, let's say, provide this treatment for patients that if they lose weight, they can actually go from being having diabetes to not having diabetes. And diabetes is very, very costly to our society. So if you can take these patients out, make them pre-diabetic, we have a fantastic opportunity to save a lot of money in the hospital system. Right now, there's no money. There's really not a lot of money to pay for these drugs. So we have to think about how can these drugs, and that was also a topic at JP Morgan, that these weight loss drugs, if they have a specific indication for instance, sleep apnea or chronic kidney disease, then the doctor and then the insurance company and then the governments, they will pay for the drugs. So that's also a niche, let's say, strategy is it's not about only the weight loss, but it's also about the comorbidities. So if you can reduce those, then you get reimbursement. So the strategy also going forward is to see which companies can actually develop weight loss drugs, but with an attractive profile so we can reduce all the other complications.
So there are several parameters to keep in check. But then it becomes a little bit contradictory in my view, my personal view, when you see a company like Novo lose 20% of their stock value over a couple of percentage points in, less weight loss than expected or anticipated. Would you consider that an overreaction from the market?
I would say probably no. It's not an overreaction. The thing was that it's all about expectations. And the expectations before those data was that Novo could have, and it was also communicated that they could have a winner in the market. And then when we saw the data, that was certainly not the case. So if you're going to have a very strong hand, it's like playing poker. If you have a very strong hand and you suddenly don't have, then you're losing. So if you're going just on the marginal, and this is marginal view, and it's also based on the information that the market had during that day, that it was expected that it had a weight loss of more than 25%, and it came out with 22.7. That is still a good weight loss, but the expectation was just high. And then, of course, the market starts to compare what is the profile out there, who are they competing with, and if this needs to have a really strong foothold in the market, was 22.7% enough? And it's always about the average perception of what is good and not good. And that day, it was not good enough.
So the old truth, under promise and over deliver, came back.
Could be one word. It can come back to always. Let's say maybe try to manage expectations somehow, but the expectations were quite high just before Christmas. So then they came out with a new drug, amycretin, later in January. They disclosed data that looked really good data. Also interesting to see it's still early data, only 125 patients. So it's still a small study. But if that can certainly be rolled out into a bigger study, that could be attractive. So that was definitely encouraging data. But the market needs to see if it is a clear winner. Mm. And we are still in sort of this waiting, so wait and see period.
Mm. So that said, you did not buy the dip then?
I did not buy the dip. Because I was, my strategy is to look at data, and not only, let's say, headline data. So there was only headline data. So that's why I'm going to Chicago this summer at the big diabetes conference. And if you go there, you see all the detailed data they will provide. They have not said that they're going to disclose it at that event, but that's my guess. Mm. So that's a forward-looking statement. So I don't know if they're going to present it. I hope, but I'm going to to this conference to understand what do doctors think. So again, that's part of my process. I can think a lot of things, seeing the press release, but I need to go out in the world, talk to doctors and see what they think and listen to what they think. And when we see the detailed data, we'll have a better understanding of the profile and also the tolerability of the treatment. It could be very tolerable, and that's really needed in the market right now because there's so many smaller things that make people not adhere to treatment day by day, 24 months out. So the big, let's say, the game changer will be, can we develop something where people will like to stay on the treatment every day for the next many, many years. And that's a big debate also right now, that what do we need to take these drugs? Every day for the next 10 years. And I think that's the same thing happened with diabetes 30 years ago, that diabetes was, if you have diabetes, you just need to move your body and eat healthy. And then suddenly we realized this is actually a disease that we need to treat. And same thing with obesity, that now we are starting to think about obesity as a disease, and that's a risk for cardiovascular complications, kidney complications. It can create sleep apnea. It can also create a lot of cancer diseases. So maybe we need to treat much earlier than before.
Preventive, basically.
Try to, or let's say, if you have some patients that are, let's say, obese right now and unhealthy, you can be obese and still healthy. But pick those patients that are obese and not healthy. If we can help them, then we can save the society a lot of costs in the long run.
Mm. I remember you actually had a keynote speech at one of our events, the summit event that we did in November. And you said, I believe the numbers were that 5% of the patients account for 50% of the costs.
Yes, exactly.
Sounds dramatic, but...
It is dramatic. It's not the typical 80-20 rule, but it is actually very telling that we have 5% of the patients. So 1 out of 20 patients that is suffering from diseases that we can actually treat today. It can be anxiety, depression, so mental health. It's all diabetes. It's also high cholesterol and hypertension. The thing is just that we have some medications today that are not entirely without side effects. So if we can develop better drugs with less side effects, people will stay on these treatments. Mm. And we can have the benefits to the healthcare system. Because if we look at the data that is provided by the hospitals, we can see that there's a lot of diabetes patients coming into the hospital in all different departments with different diseases, different complications. So if we can take them out of the hospital, we can save a lot of money. So the future is, of course, how can we prevent healthcare events and prevent you that you need to go into the hospital? It would also be nice that we could, let's say, treat the patients, take them out of the hospital, just giving them, let's say, anti-obese medication, and then take them out of the hospital. Because the problem is, if you have diabetes, a lot of people with diabetes, they don't take the medication. So if we can follow up in a better way going forward, we can have less side effects. So less neuro complications, less eye complications, suffering from diabetes. So that's a game changer. But we need to have also tools. We need to have, let's say, technology. We have to have variables that we can track, and also have good discussions with the patients in order to convince them that they should stay on treatment.
Mm. So now this all relates to the metabolic diseases, but apart from obesity, then what other major trends are you personally watching right now?
I follow cancer a lot. Cancer, there's so many different cancer diseases, and it's a very complicated area. So that's why I'm going to scientific conferences twice a year to see where is the development. And just take lung cancer, you can have different kind of lung cancer. There's a lot of types. So that also means that you can actually, let's say, really have personalized medicine for certain patients. So there's a lot of potential. It also means that there's a lot of companies, because you can really hit the tumor, but you need to also hit it with less side effect. So the better the side effect profile, you also have a winner here. So it's both about how can we really kill cancer cells and how can we activate the immune system. But it's complicated. So that's why we have to look at what is the safety profile really looking like. So there's a lot of different, let's say, technologies within cancer that is being deployed to help lung cancer, breast cancer, blood cancer. So that's why I'm going to these conferences, because I can see there's also a lot of, let's say, good investment ideas you can get early on. And you can see it with your own eyes. If you understand how to read clinical data, you can see that some things it could be, let's say, if you keep track and this is being developed, then it could become a blockbuster in the future. So that's why I'm looking at these companies a lot to try to figure out if they have a winner. And also to follow the winners. That's also important, because a lot of companies will like to try to develop something that is even better.
And then, speaking of finding winners and finding something early before it takes off, basically, what's been your best investment in your entire career, you think? If there's a one you can point to.
I think there was one that was quite interesting. Was that we had a meeting with a doctor. Because we were looking at a Danish company called Genmab, and they were developing a drug in multiple myeloma, and but we tried to set up this meeting with this doctor because it was a doctor that was running the competitors' clinical trials, and so we would like to hear his view. Of course, how do the competitors look at Genmab's? And during our conversation, we found out that actually Genmab's profile was quite attractive, and perhaps also more attractive that we had, or let's say we tried to understand the efficacy and also the safety profile. And because we are, let's say, ordinary people trying to understand this, it was very helpful to have a world-class doctor explaining to us that this safety profile was actually quite attractive.
And it disclosed that. I mean, wouldn't it be a risk then that running the competitors' clinical trials, he would be biased and saying that our thing is better?
Yes, and that's why we wanted to have, let's say, the competitor's view. That if he was biased, he was not biased. He was talking about the clinical data and the clinical knowledge that we had on hand. So, but we wanted to let's say try to cross-check that one thing is what Genmab is saying and Johnson & Johnson, what do they say, but what does the competitor say? And we need to find out what is the profile of the competitor versus Genmab product, and also to understand. It's all about trying to understand the race and who can actually come first to the market. And we also learned that just watching on clinical trials, when we came back from that meeting, that there was a less massive investment behind the competitor's drug, because we could see on clinical trials that there was not that many clinical trials compared to Johnson & Johnson's and Genmab's. So we learned that there was a race and there was a massive, let's say, push behind this drug. And it's just about, let's say, watching and learn. It's always important to learn from to learn from the experts. You have to look at this, and this. Okay, this makes sense. great.
But it's also a question of access. I mean, you said you spoke to the competitors, and average Joe may not just lift his phone up and say, "Can I speak to this guy?"
So that's why you have to let's say find people that are traveling and trying to, let's say, educate themselves and not just sit at home, because that is impossible for the average person to travel, because I mean this is a full-time job, so it's really difficult for other people to do it. And I spend all my time on trying to educate myself and to learn what's out there and what could change also, because one thing is to maybe see a winner, but also to understand and to keep track on what is the competition doing. And it's not always clear cut. There can be debate. There can certainly be a new, let's say, T-cell therapy that came up that was certainly a debate for Genmab's products. So there's always a debate out there. So it's all about data and clinical evaluation, and sometimes it also takes some time for the market to understand if this is a really threat or just a, let's say, a minor threat. So that's also why share price can move really much up and down. And then when the market can see if it is a real threat or not, then the share price will move back. So uncertainty is often very bad for share prices.
Yeah, and in your case, then it's also about getting the information and interpreting it as soon as possible or as quick as possible in order to make your bets then before the general public, so to speak.
Yes, and it's but I think it's actually for all sectors in the world that you don't have to make the decision at the time when you see an information. I saw a very interesting analysis on that on biotech companies many years ago. That you can still make money 1 month after the information is out, and that's why people need to understand the information, and that's not always easily understood. So you can still make money, or you can also lose money, of course, depending on the data. So, but there's an opportunity to if you really spend time on understanding the data after the data was released. So for me, as an investor, it's important to base my decisions on, let's say, not what I hope, but what I can see right now, what data is out there. But also understand when could a competitor come out with a new thing that could disrupt my thesis. So that's also an important, let's say, event that I need to have a clear view on.
You also have to have quite a lot of confidence in your own instinct or in your analysis, right?
Yes. So I've spent, as you know, plus 25 years in this industry, and so far it's been good. Let's say my results. So I have a good stomach feeling. Doesn't mean that I'm always just cocky and I think I'm right, and so I have, this FOMO that I have fear of missing something, So I double check, triple check to see if we are right on the right track. So it's all about trying to talk to experts. Some people say, "Oh, Claus, but you are the expert." Yes, I'm sort of an expert. I'm trying to manage opportunities and risk. So, but you have to talk to. In this case, you have to talk to people in the field. So you have to talk to cancer doctors and experts and find out how do they see these new treatments that is coming. So it's about interpreting, of course, and that's why I also think that that it has people had confidence in me, so they came with the money when I asked for the money to set up the fund. It's difficult to have, let's say, 1 or 2 years experience and come out and they say, I want to set up a fund. I had a track record that I'm very thorough in my analysis, and I spend a lot of time to understand, let's say, what I invest in.
Mm. And you mentioned that you went to JP Morgan in San Francisco, and big theme there was obesity. What about talks about the recent change in administration in the U.S.? I mean, it's things are happening really fast right now.
Things are happening extremely fast. It's difficult to keep track on what's happening really, and what could be the impact. I would say that at that conference, everybody was holding their breath and saying, okay, we know that at that time, it was just before Trump was inaugurated as president. So people are saying, okay, that could be a change. But we are actually, because we're global companies, there's a lot of change going on in a lot of countries at the same time. So it doesn't mean that we are not prepared, but we don't know what result is, what is new legislation. It also needed to be, let's say, voted for. So we need to see what's coming out. I guess a lot of companies have, let's say, plan A, B, and C for what the new administration could do.
So all the people that were holding their breaths at JPM, do you think they've let out the breath, or do you think they're more like in a panic mode right now?
I don't think there's panic at all. I think they are watching and seeing, okay, let's say if we talk about what kind of duties could be put on different goods from different regions, I would say there's different sectors that are more impacted than pharma. I think a lot of the pharma companies, the life science companies, they have actually manufacturing in the United States. So they produce the goods already in US. So they are not as much, let's say, disrupted if you had a manufacturing facility in Mexico or Canada, you could definitely see some more challenges. So so far I don't see that big change in legislation. We need to see all the proposals coming out, and of course we need to read the news every day, because there could be a new piece of news coming out, but we also need to see what kind of truly policy changes could the new administration actually put in place. In our investment strategy, we always look at, because let's say lower prices, that's a theme and has been a theme for the last 20 years. We need to have better access, better affordability in the world, both in Europe and US. So you need to have companies that are able to produce efficiently. You also have treatments to be really, really innovative, really good. If you are not that, then you are facing higher hurdles going forward, because you're only willing to pay for really innovative treatments, devices, and so on. So you really have to do the analysis on what is truly, let's say, a strong product, or let's say a more commodity-like product. So it's not really new. We know that there's this Inflation Reduction Act also coming in place later this year, and we'll see also drug discounts being put in place. So we need to evaluate what could be the implications of this, of course. So there's already a very strong reform in place in US on drugs. So that's not a new thing. So it is in place, and we know prices will fall. And that's, let's say, part of our thinking is that our healthcare budgets are under huge pressure right now. So just to have a new thing, that's not enough. You need to be able to produce it efficiently and cheap, because you cannot just come out and have a very high price. You're seeing a lot of companies coming out with better drugs, better treatments, and actually with lower price. And that's a new thing we are watching, that some companies, they say, okay, if we need to come into this market, we need to have like a 30% lower price. So the authorities can see, here is a new treatment. it's also cheaper. Let's use it. And some say that 20% is not enough. 10% is not enough to change, but 30%. Then
magic number.
Then the authorities, they are listening. And then you can get in and get reimbursement. And of course, the healthcare personnel and staff say, okay, now we can use this. It's even better and also cheaper. So, and then of course, these treatments can come in and take market share. So for new products and treatments, they have to think. So that's why, let's say, the thing is in Global Health Invest is we need to have better treatments, but also more cost-effective treatments. You have to have both things. Very good treatments and cost-effective.
I think that's in line with the long-term view that you have. But there are also more sort of immediate and sudden events that can influence things. So, out of curiosity, do you follow Trump and Musk on X, for example?
Yes, I do. Yeah, actually, I'm one of the few people that is still on X, but I follow what they are, telling the news, and you have to both listen at what they say and always also on what kind of legislation, what kind of, let's say, real impacts. News is news. That has been in the coming out from the US for the last 20 years. There's been a lot of initiatives to reform healthcare in US, and some really impactful changes has happened. So you always need to keep track on the truly changes, so really policy changes that can take place. But if you are prepared that way, that if you really invest in companies that are super sharp on having good, efficacious treatments that really provide value to the society. It can be a machine. We need to have, let's say, if we're going to have more access and more affordable drugs, we have to have facilities and we need to have test equipment in order to test that all these molecules are safe and produced safely, so everybody can feel safe taking the medication. That's hugely important, that we have high confidence in what you get, you can rely on. So all that equipment, all those providers are super important. I think the whole world is moving into this, let's say, predictive and preventive care that we have, of course, we're really good at treating acute problems, but we need to look at these chronic conditions, the chronic diseases, and we talked about that earlier. But we need to try to find out how can we prevent a serious event happening cardiovascular-wise. So that's why we need to have, for instance, variables so we can track how is the heart functioning, how is our speech, also voice analysis, hugely important, that we can actually predict also for elderly people, when could there be a heart attack probably erupting? And you can measure that in many ways. So if you could predict maybe 20 minutes in advance, you could have a healthcare staff coming out to this patient and give them maybe a blood thinning treatment, so in order to remove the blood clot or prevent the blood clot. So there's a lot of things we can actually do in order to prevent some serious events. But we have to have the right tools. So of course, data, AI and all that, we can do huge analysis on data, and we will use, of course, AI to a much higher degree than we are doing it today. It's being used a lot, also in drug development today, but we're going to use the analysis on data better and better in the coming years.
And speaking of AI, that's obviously one of the hypes right now.
Yes.
Is that something that you have also sort of incorporated in your investment strategy in any way?
As soon as I, let's say, could see that AI was becoming, let's say, a buzzword, I say, okay, what is AI? I talked to the experts. I asked them, what is AI? What kind of different layers are we talking about when we say AI? And of course, if you can have computers that can really do calculations much faster, we can have more data and we can look at more data and we can look at them quickly and faster. So in clinical development, you can probably speed up and get the information much earlier. So you can go from 2 years to 3 months, 6 months. So you can do experiments more often. So that's a good thing. Doesn't mean that you are hitting the target. You can just, let's say, do it faster. You still have to think about, okay, how do we really hit the target? But you can do the analysis, you can do the trial in the lab faster and faster. You can also use AI to find the right patients. You can look at all the clinical trials and see what kind of patients really benefited from our treatment. So let's maybe go for these patients, and we can tell the health authorities these patients, because I think we're going to see more personalized treatment being rolled out globally, that we cannot just say this treatment is for everybody. But if we can be really sharp on seeing results earlier and earlier, and I think biological biomarkers, we haven't talked much about it, but I see the next 10 years as a really big theme coming. We're seeing some looking at it now, but if we can really see the impact, if we can see the drug works within, let's say, 2 weeks instead of 3 months, we can really make a faster decision for the patient. Maybe this drug doesn't work. We need to find something else. And then we can also stop treatment if it is not working. We can save money. So all these biomarkers we'll see being developed to a much larger. I think we're just seeing the beginning of this.
So would it be a good guess then to say that you are probably looking at a few biomarker companies then?
Of course, yeah. and I think it's all about those companies that can both develop a test. We're seeing that it's not a secret that a lot of the drugs that are being approved by FDA, they also have a test. So those companies that can, let's say, develop the test that goes with the drug, of course, will make money. Mm. But if we also can analyze the blood even better and faster, we'll have a chance to really, I think, really make big changes to our healthcare system. And I think we'll see that more and more. We can see it within circulating DNA. We can find out if you are, let's say, in risk of developing cancer. So we can do this liquid biopsy, as it's called. We can analyze the blood, and I think we can do it better and cheaper in the future. I think we're just seeing the beginning of that. Also from the FDA, we can see also within lymphoma, myeloma, we can start to really count the cells, the cancer cells, and we can see and we can monitor the patients if the drug is really working and how fast, and also how deep it is working. If it can really remove all, not all, but maybe more or less every cancer cell in the blood. This is, we've been discussing seeing that for the last 10 years. Now we're seeing it being implemented and rolled out on a global scale. Mm. So we need AI, of course.
We need AI, yeah. That's probably a certain.
But we need to have the right data. We have to have the right models. We have to have the right equipment, and we have to have the right decision makers in order to roll it out. And we need to make it cheap. Otherwise, it will not take off.
Mm. Definitely a development to follow. I asked you earlier about your most memorable or your best investment. You mentioned Genmab. Mm. We never talked about exactly how good it was for you, but never mind. What's your biggest cock-up, if you will, in terms of investment? What's your biggest mistake that you regret the most?
I say this. I would say there's two things I can say that. We talked about biosimilars. So we talked about these biological molecules, and we knew that the patents were expiring. So we talked about, there's biosimilars coming into the market. We talked about that for many years. And suddenly, these biosimilars developers, the manufacturers, they became better and better, more efficient at scaling. I think we all underestimated that. I talked to the experts. They also saw some things that not happened. So it went much faster, and also the prices went much lower than we expected. So that's why it's important to pay attention to your hypothesis, your let's say your investment thesis. That am I right? I'm not right. Okay, where is this heading? So for instance, a company like Roche had its sales of 3 biological drugs in cancer. That erosion happened faster and to a lot higher degree than I expected, and a lot of other people expected. There's also a company called AbbVie in US that is also, I think, a company that I've really, let's say, misanalyzed. Because they have a drug that is being threatened by biosimilars. So of course I can see this sales is really going down, but they have developed some new treatments, and these treatments are really rolling out to a much better degree than I expected. So maybe that was a cock-up also.
It's always hard to back trade.
It's good to.
Or it's easier to back trade.
it's good to look at, okay, how can we do better? How can I do better? That and sometimes, let's say, something that you are not willing to invest in, you have to follow it, even though, because maybe one day it can really turn into a good investment. So that's why you have to both be invested, but you also have to have, let's say, a watch list of companies that you saying, okay, maybe not now. Maybe I need to see a little bit more. Maybe I need to see these products really taking off, going in the right direction, because then you have also de-risked your investment. And I think that comes back to our investment strategies to, let's say, invest a little bit later when we have more, let's say, certain ground below our feet, so we know exactly where we are going.
So typically then, if you say that you have around 25 companies in your portfolio, if you're considering a new company to invest in, what's the time frame typically for you to analyze that case before you actually make a decision? Can you say a specific sort of time frame?
I have a list of companies. I've been doing this for 20 years. So these companies have been around for many years. So they are not new. So there's certainly not a new, let's say, software developer coming in, let's say, in this, let's say, basket of companies that I look at. So I follow a lot of companies at the same time, keeping track on the 25 companies in the portfolio, but you also need to keep track on what's happening. So a lot of companies that I follow them for a very long time, and I have followed them for a very long time. And then I see, okay, now is the right time to balance the risk and the opportunity. What do I really pay for? It's important that somebody said it before, but price is what you pay, value is what you get, right? I think maybe it was Buffett, but you have to remember that you pay for something, and what you expect will happen to this company that you own a part of, where will it head for the next 3 to 5 years. So that's super important. So I don't make a decision in 10 minutes or 5 minutes, but sometimes it's good to run, go for a run in the forest and get some fresh air and think about, is this the right decision? Does it really feel also as the right decision? And if it both thinks good, looks good, and feels good, then you're probably going in the right direction.
The funny thing is that I had as a follow-up question, how do you assess an investment case in 10 minutes?
Yeah.
You don't. That's the answer, right?
I don't do it in 10 minutes, never. But if you should do for 10 minutes, then you always need to look at the value that you get. So you need to look at the profit that you get, and then the growth. And it's super important to watch companies that are willing to grow and also invest in growth. So it means investing in production. It means investing in commercial scale. super important. Otherwise, and you take risk, of course, also in R&D, but you need to take, let's say, clever risk. You need to, maybe you have to find out how can we make incremental improvement of products, or how can we really, let's say, make a step change. Maybe efficacy-wise, maybe you can integrate different machines together, so it's much easier for hospitals to run a test more efficiently. So there's many things, but the smart companies, you have to look at what are they doing.
Mm. So early on, you mentioned that you had early in your career, you had colleagues who said that I can help you, I can make you understand, or I can teach you how to think and so on. Before we wrap up today, I wanted to ask you if you have any advice to the young aspiring investors. What would be your best sort of 3-point advice or something like that?
It's a good question. I think if you are going to become an investor, I would always say that you should start to look at an annual report and try to understand what is this company doing. It's very basic, right? You need to understand what are they doing, how do they make money, do they make good money? But you also have to look at how much do they invest. Super important, both in, let's say, new production facilities, how do they invest in new products? So look at the R&D. But to understand how they make money, I think that's underestimated. And also look at the products and find out exactly what is the attribute of these products. To understand what is the purpose of these products. Are they good? And will they also look good in 5 years? So that's about competition. So as I had a good friend many years back told me just how to look at it, but you have to look at, find a market that is growing. Find good companies that can grow in this growing market. Look at the competition and find out, can they really stay ahead of competition? So it's all about that I invest in, let's say, companies where I know the products and I know the profiles. And I also know the competition is far behind. But I need to keep track. And I would advise young investors to read a lot, to understand these companies, and also to find out what do the customers really think about those products. It's super important to go out and talk to people if they can, or read stuff. You can ask ChatGPT now, but I think it's great to talk to the real people if you can. But think about what is good today and what is good tomorrow.
Mm. Speaking of ChatGPT, do you use it a lot yourself?
Actually, no. I should. I should more, but that is on my to-do list in 25. But let's say I have the AI here. I've been doing this for many years, so I know what to look at. But you can definitely ask a lot of questions. I started 2 years ago to look at it. I found out it had not very updated information. So, of course, you can find updated information, but I'm looking actually at data that is not on ChatGPT. That's why I go to the conferences. That data is not available on ChatGPT. So I cannot use it for that. So that's why I go to these scientific conferences to get that specific information, because that is not in Perplexity or ChatGPT.
Information gives you an edge. Basically.
Information is always important, yes.
Claus, thank you very much for taking the time to come here and talking to us today.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, and we wish you the best of luck with the investments and with your fund, of course.
Thank you very much.